right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&Done, your guide to one D&D. Hi, folks. As I mentioned in my last video, I'm going over the August 20 to 22 playtest documents for one D&D, which is D&D 5.5. Let's be honest. And I personally think that they wrote it backwards because, in order for you to understand things, you basically have to read the next section before you read the previous one every single time, to the point where all throughout this thing you will see these little asterisks, whatever the plural of asterisk is, you'll see those. And they specifically state in the beginning, by the way, if you see an asterisk, that means that word is defined later in the document, or that thing is defined later in the document. So they even admit, by the way, you won't understand most of this because we don't tell you what it means until the end. So I'm doing things backwards. Last time I talked about the rules changes, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I'm not quite as apocalyptic as some people are about this. Today I'm going to talk about feats, because they do introduce quote-unquote new feats in here. And the reason that they do is now every background gives you a feat as part of the backgrounds. Now, we'll talk about backgrounds when I do character origins, which will be the last video I do on this thing. But effectively, they've changed a lot of things to make your background significantly more important. Your ability score increases are based on your background, not on your race. Which is a new thing for D&D. Specifically, they've always tied ability score increases to race in some way, shape, or form ever since original D&D. Your race was really important. They are now moving away from the importance of race and putting background to be more important. And another thing that is tied to your background is every background gets a feat. Now, you may have heard me talk about and rant about how I think it's massively stupid that the newer backgrounds in D&D 5th edition, like the Strixhaven or the ones in Spelljammer, give you free feats at level 1. There's a reason for this. Because that makes them significantly more powerful than every other background that has existed for almost a decade. A lot of people don't realize D&D 5th edition launched in 2014. It is now 2022. D&D 5th edition has existed for 8 years. When one D&D, which is D&D 5.5, launches in 2024, D&D 5th edition will be 10 years old and will be the second longest running D&D edition. Just behind D&D 2nd edition, which lasted for 11 years before they came out with 3rd edition. So, backgrounds have been a thing for half a decade. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that they started going, well, let's make backgrounds more powerful and effectively punish everyone that's using the old backgrounds. We want people to use the new backgrounds because they're significantly more powerful than anything in the old backgrounds. Cool. I'm not a fan of that. However, as I mentioned in just my overview of when did D&D in general, I'm actually not 100% against the idea of backgrounds all getting a feat. Because, again, my big issue was the balance issue, and that feats are meant to be massive changes to how you play your character. That was one of the selling points of D&D 5th edition, because when feats were first introduced in 3rd edition, feats were these tiny piecemeal things that generally a single feat was never useful. Ever. I cannot think of a single feat aside from maybe weapon finesse that you ever like, oh good, I got a single feat. Generally, you needed feat trees in order for something to be useful. Like the cleave feat. The cleave feat required the power attack feat, first of all. And the power attack feat, no one ever used. However, they did use cleave but not that much, because Cleave was really just a step to improved Cleave, and barbarians went nuts with improved Cleave, because what they would do is they would wander into a group of small monsters and they would kill one, and then Cleave just lets you attack another creature if you killed one. And so they do it again, but Cleave only lets you do that once. Improved Cleave, you can just keep doing it. And you would watch a barbarian just run into a group while they're raging and just go boom, 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 and take out like 5 monsters in one turn. Completely breaking action economy. If that's what people wanted. People didn't take power attack so that they could take a minus to their attack roll and do a little bit extra damage. No, they took power attack to get Cleave, and they took Cleave to get improved Cleave. That was what you always did, and that's how feat trees work. So 4th edition was a little bit nicer, where yes, they still had tons of feat, but the feats were a little bit more useful, where you could take just a single feat and it would feel good, and it would make a big enough change that you would feel good about taking a feat. However, they still did feat trees and the things like that. So it wasn't perfect. 5th edition, they wanted feats to be special. So you only get them once every 4 levels. Most classes only get a total of 5 feats, and that is if you don't take any ability score improvements. Now, because most characters will start with a 16 as their highest ability score through most building methods, maybe a 17 if you're weird. That means you probably need to spend at least 2 of those 5 feat opportunities improving your core ability score that you need for your character to work. So in general, you're only going to get 2 or 3 feats. So they had to be something that was special. And they were. I like how feats work in 5th edition. Are all the feats amazing and wonderful? No. But I think the feat system in 5th edition is significantly better than anything that happened in 3rd edition, anything that happened in 4th edition, and definitely better than the Pathfinder 2nd edition monstrosity that are 7 different types of feats and none of them are worth anything. Now they're making feats as part of the background. Yeah. I think it's interesting. One of the big problems with backgrounds currently in 5th edition is nobody gives a fuck about them. Literally, you choose your background as part of character creation and you never think about it. Again, it's never referenced. You don't talk about it. There's nothing in any published adventure that mentions, by the way, if you have this particular background, then maybe you can get this bit of information. Nothing. So part of the reason that backgrounds are not a part of D&D 5th edition as people play them is Wizards of the Coast didn't give a shit about them and never did anything to make them the slightest bit useful anywhere beyond character creation. And there are lots of ways that you could have, and there are lots of ways in my games that I go, well, your background is you're a soldier, right? Well, then you know this, this, and this, or you can make this check, or you can do this because of your background. Would have been very, very easy to put that into a billion different pre-written adventures. They just never did. So nobody uses backgrounds at all. Background features are really, really interesting and fun, but they tend to be more roleplay focused. And as everybody knows that plays RPGs, if you can't use it in combat, then it doesn't exist. So now they're making the background, first of all, give you your ability score increases, and they're also giving them these feats, which tend to have mostly combat focused, though some of them are arguably combat focused. And I'm not 100% against it. Like I said, my big issue with them right now is they've created an imbalance where new backgrounds are just better than old backgrounds 100% of the time. There's no question. And as I mentioned before, good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers. And right now, new feats are the right answer. They're always better 100% of the time than any background you will want. And because backgrounds are designed to be more role-playing focused, and they're designed to give, you know, a backstory to your character, that limits your role-playing choices as well, because now you have to find a way to shoehorn your character idea into one of these new backgrounds so you can get something that you actually want, which is a feat that's built into the background. So the 1D&D backgrounds feats are interesting. To be blunt, the new feats that they show up here, first of all the feats in here are what are called first level feats, and we'll talk about that when I start talking about the parts of a feat in a few seconds here. They're all first level feats, so these are feats that are designed to be taken at for first level. So that's the first thing. None of these are going to be, should be game breaking or anything thing like that. And a lot of them already exist in 5th edition, though the ones in 1D&D are very different. And I like that. I think that the changes that they make, I'm actually not opposed to using the 1D&D feats in place of the current 5th edition ones, because these ones, they're not better as in right or wrong answer kind of thing. They just work better than the ones in there. These look like refined versions of them. Let's actually dive into the feats themselves. By the way, this is the second time I'm recording this video, because the first time I got to this point, looked down at my recording software and saw mic muted. And so I had to re-record all of it. So hopefully this is better. So the first thing they do in the feat section is they talk about the parts of a feat. And the first thing they say is level. Each feat has a level. To take a feat, your level must equal or exceed the feat's level. So something that I thought might be a thing is every single feat here is listed as first level feat. Again, the reason that they have the feats here is because the backgrounds mention the feats, and so they can't put the backgrounds in without putting these feats in. Make sense? Okay, moving on. So part of me was kind of hoping that you would have first level feats and then other feats, and that's basically what the level thing effectively says, is you have first level feats and then you will have other ones. However, because part of a like feat stat block is now going to be the level of the feat, I'm thinking more likely than not what's going to happen is you're going to have first level feats, you're going to have 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 19th, because that's when all classes get feats. And you may have a few extra feats at weird levels like 6 and 10, because fighters get feats at 6 and 10. So we'll see, or maybe 6 and 11. I can't remember. I'm playing a fighter right now and I don't remember. But anyway, so all of these are designed to be either built into a background or taken at first level for one reason or another. I kind of like the idea. I'm not particularly fond of the idea that you now have leveled feats. Simply because it waters down a system that's already designed to be pretty unique. But I would be okay with the idea of having a subclass of feats, instead of them being first level feats, calling them specifically background feats. Because that's what background features are, and they already exist. The big difference between background features and feats is background features tended to be role-playing focused, and we can't have that. We can't have people role-playing in our role-playing games. Everything has to have a combat ability. But I'm actually okay with the idea of... I would like them to create a specific category of feat called background feats, that the only time you can take them is part of the background. Now, I know some people will get upset and they'll be like, but no, I want to take 2 different background feats, and that's not possible because you can't have 2 backgrounds. So I want all feats to be available to everyone, so I can make my super overpowered character that can smite for 47,000 damage in a single attack, and I can kill Tiamat by farting on him. That's the character I want to make, and if you don't let me make that character, you are a bad GM. You know, maybe you should just get better at GMing, and maybe you can You can get them for real players like me. So I know that would be the complaint that. Thank you, phone. That people would be like, no, I want to be able to min-max my character. I actually think it'd be cool if your background gave you something unique, like it currently does. But I think that's going to fall on deaf ears. So we'll see what happens. The next thing to talk about is prerequisites. This is not a new thing for D&D 5th edition. There are feats that have prereqs in them already. However, prereqs were generally the exception rather than the rule in feats in general. Basically, you kind of expected that any feat you could take any time, and if you couldn't take it at any time, they would specifically say, by the way, this one requires you to have this or that. And I believe prereqs have been a thing since the Player's Handbook, because there are feats in the Player's Handbook that have prereqs in them. So it's not like this is a new thing. Now they're just standardizing it of, we're always going to tell you if there's any prereqs, and making prereqs kind of a more accepted thing. I know a lot of people that don't even think about prereqs for feats, because most of the time, if you were to take a feat that had a prereq, like if I remember correctly, yeah. So for the defensive duelist has a prereq. The prereq is dexterity 13 or higher, and it specifically allows you to basically parry with a finesse weapon. It is a remarkably useful feat. I love it. I use it on my monk. However, if you are using a finesse weapon, you already have a dexterity score of 13 or higher. It's just how it works. So I know a lot of people that don't even realize that Defensive Duelist has a prereq, because the only people that would ever use it are so far beyond the prereq that it's almost not necessary to have the prereq there. And yeah, so prereqs aren't a thing. The one thing that makes me a little bit hesitant is the idea that if we're kind of standardizing the idea of prereqs, because this is the lesson that WotC just seems unable to learn, which is feat trees are bad. They're always bad. I have never seen a single system that uses a feat tree system that has ever been fun. 3rd edition introduced feat trees. And a really good example, I mentioned it before, the idea of power attack. Nobody gives a flying fuck about power attack. No one uses it. The reason you take power attack is it opens up a bunch of other feats for you, specifically the cleave feat. And again, nobody gives a shit about cleave. What they really want is improved cleave. So what it was is they couldn't give people cleave at improved cleave at level 1. That would be massively stupid. So in order to make it so that you couldn't take it at level 1, they made these additional feats in there. And that's not the only thing. All of those feats also have ability score requisites as well. So not only did you have to have, I think it was strength for power attack, you had to have strength. I think for power attack you need 13 strength. And I think once you started to get up to cleave or improved cleave, you had to go up to 15 just a strength. I'm going off of memory here because it's been a long time since I've built a strength-based 3rd edition character. I tended to do dex-based ones. So, yeah, nobody wanted power attack. Nobody wanted cleave. They wanted improved cleave. But in order to kind of fix the fact that improved cleave massively breaks the game, they're like, well, we're going to make them jump through additional hoops to get the thing that they actually wanted. My other favorite example is the idea of the 2-weapon fighting feat. The actual 2-weapon fighting feat is worthless. The bonuses that it gives you to your main hand and offhand, which they're not actually bonuses, they're reductions in penalties. So they're not even giving you something, they're taking away something that they're taking away something bad that they gave you. So they're fixing a problem they created. And the bonuses that you get, or the reduction in penalties that you get, is not enough to actually use two-weapon fighting. You generally, bare minimum, have to get to improve two-weapon fighting to the point where you no longer have a negative modifier on both of your attacks. And generally, you also had to take the ambidexterity feat, which was not part of the feat tree, but it very easily could have been. Because without the ambidexterity feat and two-weapon fighting and improved two-weapon fighting, at least one of your attacks was going to be made with a negative modifier. And that just meant you weren't hitting the target ever. It just wasn't a useful thing. And that's how feat trees always are. Even if you look at Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they still use feat trees. And they still have the same problem. When I was building the monk, the feat trees that you get, the stances for monks are feat trees, where the base version is kind of cool, but quickly becomes useless unless you take the improved version of that stance at a higher level. If you don't do that, then you've wasted your earlier feat. So taking that feat just really feels like, I'm making a decision here at 1st or 2nd level, but that decision is also making a decision at 4th level, is making a decision at 7th level, at 12th level. One decision takes me down a path that I can't deviate off of, or my character doesn't work. That's what feat trees do, and that's what I don't want to see in 5th edition, especially since 5th edition, you don't get that many feats. In 1 D&D, again, they may change everything. Effectively, feats are no longer optional in 1 D&D, so it's possible that they may go back into the feat tree thing. Wizards of the Coast has been trying to bring feat trees back. They have not worked at all. Every single time they've tried to bring feat trees back, people have rioted because... And I understand there are people who play 3rd edition. It's like, no, they're really great. And I know the Pathfinder players, especially the 2e players, are going, no, you don't know what you're talking about. As soon as you stop drinking the Kool-Aid, as soon as you get out of feat trees, you realize how much they suck. Because they're literally just giving you extra work to get what you want. If you have to take 3 feats to get the one ability that you want, throw out the other 2 feats and just give me the one ability that I want and let me do other things. That's what 5th edition did. Instead of getting a feat every other level, you only get them every 4 levels, and they're really useful for the most part. Not all of them, but most of them are. So feat trees are just the lesson that Wizards of the Coast just doesn't seem willing to learn is feat trees aren't fun. Because I've never seen an RPG, any RPG, not even like, I'm not even going to limit this to just like D&D based RPGs like D&D and Pathfinder or the Star Wars D20 system that existed back during 3rd edition. I have never seen feat trees in any RPG I have studied that have ever been fun. Because in order to incentivize you to actually get the higher end feat trees, generally what they have to do is they have to make the lower version of the feat tree next to useless, but just barely this tiny bit of improvement to justify the fact is like, well, you can take this and it's really not worth it. But if you just stick it out for a few more levels, you can get the thing that you really want here. Again, perfect example is the 2-weapon fighting. 2-weapon fighting doesn't, the 2-weapon fighting feat from 3rd edition is not useful. If you take the 2-weapon fighting feat in 3rd edition, you can't 2-weapon fight. It doesn't work. If you are a ranger that specializes in 2-weapon fighting, you get the 2-weapon fighting feat for free at 2nd level. You cannot 2-weapon fight at 2nd level. It doesn't work. When you get up to, if I remember correctly, Rangers got improved tip weapon fighting at 5th, I think. It's been a long time since I built a Ranger in 3rd edition. Believe they got it at 5th. Once you got to 5th level, and you got the improved 2-weapon fighting, which actually reduced the modifiers to enough that you would have positive modifiers on both your main hand and offhand attack, you could actually do pretty well, and you could actually start 2-weapon fighting. Especially if somewhere in those levels you took the ambidexterity feat, which made it even better. To basically, you were using the same attack roll on both weapons. It was really useful. But that meant you could not 2-weapon fight until you were 5th level minimum as a ranger who at 2nd level specifically said, I am a sortie ranger. I use 2 weapons. Well, yeah, but you can't really do that until 5th level. Despite the fact that you had to make the decision at 2nd level to choose between the archery fighting style or the 2-weapon fighting style, you couldn't actually use your 2-weapon fighting style until you got to 5th level. Whereas the archery fighting style you can use from level 1. Archery had its own issues. Shooting into combat was the dumbest rule ever. But it was actually useful at 2nd level when you picked it. So that is my issue with feat trees, is that is how they have always been done. It's that way in Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's that way in Pathfinder 1st edition. Every single time I have seen a feat system where they use feat trees, the only way they have ever done them is your base level feats kinda suck. The good ones will make them kinda useful, but the only reason you take the base level feats is to get the better feat later on. And it never feels good. So that is the one fear I have with the prerequisites becoming the default, where they go, yes, we're always going to tell you about the prereqs, is that they're going to try and bring back feat trees, and we don't need them. The 5th edition feats are a great idea, and they work exactly the way they're supposed to. Are all of them perfect? No. But as soon as we talk about the actual feats here, you can see how changing just a few things makes them really, really good. Because there's a few feats in here that were not useful in 5th edition that in 1D&D turn into really cool feats. So, yeah. Final thing about parts of a feat is repeatable. Again, the default in 5th edition right now is no feats are repeatable, and if they are, they will specifically say in the feat, you can get this feat multiple times. This is making the default of, you can assume anything is repeatable unless we tell you no, which, again, if you look at the feats that they have here, I don't think they have a single repeatable feat in here. Oh no, there's one, looks like there's one repeatable feat. No, there's 2 repeatable feats in here. So yeah, there are repeatable feats. And again, there's repeatable feats in 5th edition already. So it's not that big a deal. I just find it interesting that they're now going, no, the default is everything is repeatable unless we say no. Whereas the default before was nothing is repeatable unless we tell you so. So just kind of a change in the mindset is all that is. So yeah, that's the parts of a feat. Moving on, let's actually talk about the feats. The first feat, alert. Now, alert already exists in 5th edition, and it is a really undervalued feat. Mostly because it doesn't have a massive mechanical benefit in combat, but its main benefit is combat focused, and people tend to undervalue things that don't allow you to roll bigger dice. The feat alert in 5th edition is you gain a +5 bonus to initiative, you can't be surprised or you're conscious, and other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. Those 3 things are really, really useful. The +5 bonus to initiative, that is the largest bonus in 5th edition. There's nothing that gives you a higher bonus than +5. And a +5 bonus to initiative is really, really useful. I have, in one of my campaigns, one of the players took the alert feat specifically so in combat, they're almost always first. And they use that to their advantage. Now, another reason why the alert feat is not as popular in 5th edition is the second thing. You can't be surprised while you're conscious. is not quite as useful as a magic item that's remarkably easy to get, which is called a Weapon of Warning, which actually just means you can't be surprised no matter what. Your weapon will wake you up if you're unconscious. So that one just isn't quite as useful. And then the other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. There's so many other ways to keep creatures from being effectively invisible to you that a lot of people undervalue that aspect too. So most people, when they think of the alert feat in 5th edition, they go, oh, +5 bonus to initiative, that's not worth a feat. Because they don't think about anything else as the feat. They only think, oh, +5 bonus to initiative, which is still really, really useful. The 1 D&D version is actually cool. So the first thing it gives you is when you roll initiative, you can add your proficiency bonus to the roll. This is interesting because, again, the 5th edition, you just get a +5 bonus. Initiative proficiency, which is what they call it under the new one, effectively means you start off with a small bonus to initiative, and then as you gain levels, the initiative bonus gets bigger and bigger because your proficiency bonus gets bigger and bigger. And I think I like this better because a +5 bonus to initiative at level 4 means you are never going more than maybe second in initiative, even with really high dex enemies. You're always going to be rolling really, really high. And then as you get to higher levels, it starts to balance out a little bit. But you're generally, if you have the alert feat, you're generally going to be the first one of your allies that gets to go, which can be useful. This, with the fact that it kind of scales, you don't really need a +5 to your initiative especially at level 1, to be first in initiative order. A +2 is more than enough. So actually, I think that's kind of cool. But it's the second part that actually makes this interesting. So, immediately after you roll initiative, you can swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally in the same combat. You can't make this swap if you or the ally is incapacitated. So this flirts with my favorite kind of D&D character, the Controller, which is a dreaded 4th edition to term, but it fits. So now the alert feat doesn't just mean that you're first. The alert feat means you get to pick who's first. And I love that. That's amazing. It means this particular feat doesn't just help you. In general, most feats are only useful to you. There's a few other ones like the damage ones in Tasha's that the rest of your party are going to get benefits from, or like the chef feat where you are giving, temporary hit points to your friends. Yeah, there are some, but most feats are going to be things, well, what can I do? And this instantly, the first feat that they show off in the playtest is, by the way, you get to choose who goes first. I love it! Now again, obviously if you don't roll high enough, you can't. But again, the initiative swap specifically says you can swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally in the same combat. So you don't even have to be at the top of the initiative order. You could roll like butts, which is how I prefer to roll, and get bottom in the initiative order. And the cleric who just goes, well, shit, I have nobody to heal. You can go, hey, want a tradesy? And then they can go at the end and clean up the mess that you guys have just finished. And you get to, just get to swap your initiative with anybody. And there's so many ways that you can use that to do cool shit. You roll super, super high, but you have got a dude that you cannot let them get an attack off. And even with your sneak attack, you're not going to be able to one-shot this Giga guy. And if he gets an attack off, bad things are going to happen. But your monk just so happens to have rolled poorly. So you go, hey, monk, you want to punch this guy before he gets a chance to do anything? Go for it. Or maybe your monk rolled higher than you. But you're not playing a rogue. You're not really playing a super high. You're not really playing a super high damage. Maybe you are playing the cleric, and you just like the ability to kind of choose where you go. And so the monk's going to go, and the monk's going to be able to stun them, but no one else is going to really be able to get a benefit before another creature that takes their turn, and they have to deal with that. So maybe you switch your initiative with the paladin so he can come in and just do some smiting to burn this guy down so the rest of the party can deal with everyone else. Like, there's so many ways you can use this. Or it could just be, I have no idea what I want to do with my turn. I tend to be a very reactive player depending on what my allies are doing. So I'm just going to switch with someone lower in combat so I have enough time to figure out what I'm going to do with my turn. For controller-based classes, going first can, depending on how you've built your controller, can be a huge detriment because if you are an ally controller, is what I could call it. Effectively, if you're a controller that focuses mostly on manipulating your own team and giving them benefits and buffs and things like that, going later can be a benefit to you because you can see kind of the situations that they get themselves into and can see best how you can organize that. Where if you're an enemy controller where you mainly focus on controlling the other to the team, going first can be really useful. And again, initiative swap allows for both of those situations. There isn't a character class where the alert feat doesn't have a benefit. Like, some characters don't want to be first in combat. They just don't. If you focus on healing and you go first, you've nothing to do on your first turn. But with initiative swap, it means that literally, if you roll super high and you can't use that because of just how you've built your character, you just find someone who actually can use it and swap with them. It's such a cool thing. I like it a billion times better than the alert feat, and I like the alert feat in 5th edition. I think it's a great feat. I would be perfectly fine with my players using the 1 D&D version of it in 5th edition currently. It doesn't break the game. It doesn't do anything. It gives you interesting choices. I like that. It also means I can surprise people again, because that's always fun as a DM. So, moving on. The next feat, Crafter. Now, crafting magic items in general in 5th edition. Magic items are supposed to be super rare in 5th edition because in 3rd edition and 4th edition, they gave them out like candy. And in 4th edition, they actually had to make specific rules if you didn't want to run a game with tons of magic items, and the magic items in 4th edition are awesome. I've been building a bunch of 4th edition characters for something that may or may not happen. And I'm building them at level 6 because level 6 is effectively the level 5 of D&D 5th edition. And so level 6, if you build a character starting at level 6, you get one level 7 magic item, one level 6 magic item, one level 5 magic item, and enough gold to buy another level 6 item. And, oh boy, they are nuts. But in 4th edition, they actually had to make specific rules because you cannot play the game if you don't have magic items because your attack rolls won't be high enough at higher levels. So they had to make specific rules. 5th edition, they're designed to be much more rare. So the crafter feat, you would think would be tied to making magic items because they had skills in 3rd edition that allowed you to make magic items, and in 4th edition, you didn't really make magic items; you bought them. Like, magic items were a commodity, so you didn't really need to make them. You just went into Magic Items Are Us and picked the ones that you liked. So you would think that's what the crafter feat would be. It's not. Let's talk about what it actually is. So you gain tool proficiency with 3 different artisan tools of your choice. The second thing, whenever you buy a non-magical item, you receive a 20% discount on it. That one's kind of cool. And then when you craft an item using a tool with which you have tool proficiency, the required crafting time is reduced by 20%. As 5th edition right now is, the crafter feat is worthless. And as 1 D&D is right now, the crafter feat is worthless because there really aren't good crafting rules. I know the DMG has some kind of guidelines about players crafting certain things, and they expanded on that. I think in Tasha's they created more things that you can craft, but for the most part, crafting in 5th edition just really isn't a thing. Which sucks because it is a really cool part of really any RPG is the ability to kind of make your own stuff. You know, there are certain, like, artificers are built around the idea that they make stuff. And I have campaigns where one of my campaigns has an artificer in it, and she builds stuff, and it's cool. So, I've made up my own crafting rules into the things like that, and it's not exact, and a lot of it's based on rolls and just intuition on my part. So right now, the fact that you get a 20% discount, there's not a ton of stuff that you buy that's non-magical. Like, in 5th edition, money is a problem because certain classes, like if you're a wizard, you go through money like it's candy. Because every time you copy a spell, you're spending money like there's no tomorrow. If you are a gunslinger, if you use Matt Mercer's gunslinger fighter subclass, you have to kind of experiment and build your own guns into the things like that. And so there's a money sink built into that. Most other classes, because you generally aren't supposed to be able to buy magic weapons and items in D&D 5th edition, and they say as much in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They say specifically they're supposed to be rare. In general, you're not supposed to be able to, like, there aren't Magic R Us stores, and buying magic items is a thing that happens in D&D, but it's something that happens in secret, mostly with the aristocracy, and so just getting to a place where you would even know where magic item auction was happening would be extremely rare unless you had some pretty amazing connections. That's taken right from the DMG. And then non-magic items that you buy, things like food. Okay, well, there's lots of ways to get food. You know, you might pay for your lodging and stuff like that, but as you get to higher levels, there's just not a lot of use for money. And generally, DMs have to come up with money sinks and things like that. In the D&D Adventurers League, money became such a big problem that they got rid of money. You no longer get money in the D&D Adventure League. You get treasure tokens, which means wizards get shafted. Or at least that's how it was. I don't know if they... Again, I stopped playing Adventure League stuff in, like, Season 8, I think, or Season 7, maybe, when they got rid of money. So being able to buy non-magical items for a 20% discount, it is not that big a deal, depending on your class. You know, if you're a ranger and you have to constantly be buying ammunition, well, yeah, 20% discount might be nice, but it's not that big a deal. Ammunition is cheap. And then the crafting thing, you know, the crafting time is reduced by 20%. Again, none of these things just feel very good. But if they make more robust crafting rules and actually create like a crafting system for 5th edition, Crafter could be a really, really interesting thing. Being able to make something 20% faster is nice. 20% still feels like a kind of a low number for a feat. Again, compared to Alert, where it's basically I get to choose who goes first in combat, to, oh, well, instead of taking an hour to do something, it only takes 45 minutes. And that wouldn't even be it. It'd be like 12 minutes. I don't know. What's 20% of 60? 10% is 6. Yeah, so 12 minutes. You can do it 12 minutes faster. Wow, I can't believe I had to do that math out loud in order to figure out 20% of 60. Oh, I used to be good at math. I used to do differential calculus in my head for fun. On my, I'm not kidding, on one of my science tests, I got bored. And so I flipped the test over and I did just a really quick integration. I just made up an integration equation and I solved it on the back of the test. And I got extra points for it. Because I think the teacher thought I was trying to figure out the pH. Because there was a question about pH levels. And I think I got the question wrong. Because I always confuse the pH levels of acids and bases. Because above... I think it's above 7 is basic and below 7 is acidic. Or I might have gotten that wrong. Again, I didn't do well in that course. Well, I got a B. So for some people, that's doing well. For someone like me, that's not. Especially for a science course. So anyway, on the back, I just do this integration because I was bored. And I think I got like a 6, was it? And I didn't try for this number. I just put random numbers into an integration equation, did the formula, and did everything, and just put it because I was bored. Because I hated that class. I was an honors student, and the only course, the only science credit I could get in that particular slot was kind of it was the dumb science course. It was a science course for people that needed a science credit that didn't like science. And so it was a really easy course, and I was really bored through most of it. And so, yeah, I did that, and the teacher actually gave me an extra point because he's like, well, you said that it was basic, but the pH level would actually be close to that. So you just... I think she thought that somehow I was using differential calculus, or integral calculus in that particular instance, to try and figure out the pH level, which is not how you... I don't understand pH levels or how they work, but I don't believe you use integral calculus. Integral calculus is used to find the area under a curve. And you use it a lot for finding the volume of weird shaped items. That's what integral calculus is used for primarily. I don't think it's used for figuring out pH levels. I don't know the math behind pH levels, but I don't think integral calculus is used. Differential calculus might be, because differential calculus is used to find the slope at any point on a curve, because the slope changes. That's how curves work. So anyway, going back to the crafter feat, 20% just doesn't seem like... I would much rather see maybe keep the discount at 20%, because the discount at 20% turns into big if you're buying like a ship or something. That's a large chunk of change you're getting rid of. But maybe the faster crafting, make it 50%, because then it actually feels useful. And again, they need an actual crafting system for this to be a useful feat. Right now, there is no crafting system. There's some vague guidelines in a couple DM-focused books that nobody reads that part of. So, anyway, yeah, moving on. Also, there is no crafting feat in 5th edition right now, because crafting isn't a thing in 5th edition. So, the next feat is the healer feat. By the way, all of these are first level feats, and thus far none of them have had prereqs. So, the healer is a feat currently in 5th edition. This is what it is in 5th edition. When you use a healer's kit to stabilize a dying creature, the creature also regains 1 hit point. That is a massively useful thing. Because the way that a healer's kit works, and a lot of people don't realize that healer's kits are even a thing, but if you're proficient with a healer's kit, in combat, if someone goes to 0 hit points, you can go to a healer's kit. They have 6 charges in a healer's kit. You can go over and you instantly stabilize them. There's no roll necessary. You just instantly stabilize them so they don't have to make saving throws. So healing kits can be massively, massively useful in combat, because if you have someone that has just rolled their second failed death save, well, they're 1 fail away from their character dying and them having to get a new character. So going over, and you have to burn your action to do it, but using your action to stabilize them is really, really useful. However, if you take the healer, not only do you stabilize them, and again, there's no roll required if you're proficient with a healer's kit. Normally, anyone can stabilize, but it requires a medicine roll to do it. And so if your wisdom score isn't very high, or you're not trained in medicine, it can be really, really difficult to get the roll that you need. Healer's kit's just an auto, hey, they're stabilized. And now it's an auto, they get 1 hit point, so they're conscious again. That's really useful. And then as an action, you can spend 1 use of a healer's kit to tend to a creature and restore 1d6 plus 4 hit points to it, plus additional hit points equal to the creature's maximum number of hit die. The creature can't regain hit points from this feat again until it finishes a short or long rest. So effectively, healing kits turn into a 6-use potion. And that's really, really useful. Again, especially with how limited healing is in general. For in 5th edition, just healing just doesn't work quite as well. It's one of the things I like about 4th edition is because the healing surge thing, healing works really well in 4th edition, and it doesn't in 5th edition. So yeah, the healer currently in 5th edition is a good, albeit very underutilized feat. Because again, there's a bunch of other ways you can get healing too. You can shove a potion in their mouth, and get a better effect than trying to stabilize them with a healer's kit. So yeah, undervalued but somewhat useful. Healer in 1 D&D. First thing you get, if you have a healer's kit, you can expend 1 use of it and tend to a creature within 5 feet of you as an action. That creature can expend 1 of its hit dice, and then you roll that die. The creature regains a number of hit points equal to the roll plus your proficiency bonus. So this makes it even better than the one that they had there. Well, this leans a little bit more into, again, the idea of healing surges. Healing surge in D&D 4th edition, a healing surge was a quarter of your total hit points. And anytime you got healed, you generally didn't get healed a dice amount. You were able to use a healing surge. And you had a limited number of healing surges per day. Basically the same thing as hit dice, but you didn't roll it. It was a flat number. And that meant 4 healing surges meant you were at max hit points. So a creature with a ton of hit points would get a large healing surge, and a creature with a lower number of hit points, you get a lower healing surge. And there were feats you could take that would increase the amount that your healing surge is healed. So there's a lot of really useful things. And this kind of goes back to that, where it's based on their hit die, not anything that you have. And then you also add your proficiency bonus to it. So I like that idea of, let's go back to the idea of creatures with more hit points need more hit points healed to them than a creature with less hit points. So that I think is pretty interesting. And then the other thing, whenever you roll a die to determine the number of hit points you restore with a spell or with this feat's battle medic benefit, that's what the first thing was called, you can re-roll the die if it rolls a 1, and you must use the new roll. So not only now do you have healer's kits, which again are not particularly expensive and give you 6 charges generally, you now have an item that you can go around healing people with it. The one thing I'm not 100% certain of, it does say you can use it and tend to a creature within 5 feet of you. It doesn't specifically say you can target yourself with that, like heal thyself, physician, or physician heal thyself. So that would be the only thing I would want a clarification on, is can you use this on yourself? Because if you can, like, that is a really useful ability. And then healing rerolls, even if you don't use the healing kit, if you just have healing spells, this means anyone that has abilities that allow you to heal, which there are a lot of different classes that do that. Fighters get the ability to heal themselves. This becomes something that any class can get a benefit from, because so many classes have at least something that lets them get stuff. Now, it does specifically say restore with a spell or with this feat's battle medic benefit. So theoretically, Second Wind is not a spell. It is a fighter feature. So as this is written here, I would rule that it doesn't work with that, which I don't think it needs to do that. It's just whenever you restore hit points, I'm trying to think of an instance where that could be abused. I'm not really coming up with it. I really think just make it anytime you heal. Again, it's a feat. Make it useful. If you are knowledgeable of 5th edition, you can come up with a way that you could abuse healing rerolls working for literally any time, any healing whatsoever, because the vast majority of healing is done with spells anyways in 5th edition. Let me know in the comments down below if you can find a way to break making healing rerolls work for everything instead of just spells or battle medic. So yeah, overall, like I said, the healer feat, I think the original the 5th edition version of the healer feat is the hit point restoration. I think is slightly more useful to a point, because it gives you a bonus based on how many hit dice they have. So higher levels does more, whereas battle medic, it's just based on their hit die, so it's going to do more just in general, and then your proficiency bonus. You technically will get a little bit better heal at higher levels with the 5th edition version, but I'm fine with the 1 D&D version. I think it's balanced enough. Just make healing rerolls work for all heals. Moving on. The next feat, Lucky. Everybody knows Lucky. Lucky exists already. It is infamous. In 5th edition, you get 3 luck points. You make an attack roll, ability check, saving throw. You can spend a luck points to roll an additional d20. And you choose which of the d20s is used for the attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So the interesting thing about luck is luck. A lot of people think luck just gives you advantage whenever you want it. It doesn't. Advantage or disadvantage requires you to roll 2 dice and use the higher or the lower. Luck allows you to roll an additional die and choose which one you want to use, either the one that you originally rolled or the new one, which means that with advantage, disadvantage, you are rolling 2 dice. Theoretically, with Lucky, you could roll with advantage and then use luck to effectively re-roll one of them. And then if it still isn't great, you can use the old one. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And then you can also spend a luck point when a roll is made against you, using the same thing, and then you regain expended luck points when you finish a long rest. So you get 3 luck points. The 1 D&D version. You have a number of luck points equal to your proficiency bonus, so more luck points starting at, I think, level 8 or something, whenever you get 4. You can spend the points on the benefits below, and you regain your expended luck points when you finish a long rest. 1, immediately after you roll a d20 for a d20 test, you can spend 1 luck point to give yourself advantage on the roll. And then when a creature rolls a d20 for an attack roll against you, you can spend 1 luck point to impose disadvantage on that roll. So, there is a difference with this. With this, advantage and disadvantage in 5th edition cancel each other out, and you can't have multiple aspects of advantage or multiple aspects of disadvantage. So effectively what that means is if you already have advantage on a roll, luck cannot help you. And if you have disadvantage on a roll, the only thing luck can do is prevent you from rolling disadvantage. In the same way, luck can be used to take away advantage from an enemy, but if the enemy is already rolling at disadvantage, you cannot make them re-roll anything. The 5th edition version of luck is significantly more useful because it literally allows you to roll an additional die, whereas this basically just gives you the ability to give yourself advantage or give enemy attack rolls disadvantage when you want. So the fact that they're giving you more luck points is balanced out by the fact that it is a significantly less useful version of the feat. And I will guarantee the reason why they have changed it is a lot of dungeon masters hate the lucky feat because most people don't understand how the lucky feat works. And min-maxers use the lucky feat in really, really weird ways that pisses off dungeon masters. Combining the lucky feat with like halfling luck is just a pain in the ass. So I can understand exactly why they did it. Do I think it's necessary? I don't think the lucky feat is overpowered. I think it's somewhat annoying sometimes. But I think compared to other feats, I don't think it's that much more powerful than anything. This version of it, I don't think is as much fun. The fact that you can get it at level 1, as opposed to Lucky, you generally can't get that until 4th level unless you're a variant human. And I don't think I've ever seen a variant human take the luck feat. Generally, again, if you're going to be min-maxing with the lucky feat, you're going to be a halfling. That's how it goes. The lucky feat, again, it makes sense. And it works, and it fixes a problem that some people think is an issue in current 5th edition. So I understand how it works. I'm not particularly fond of it. I don't like the fact that they're going to limit you to advantage or disadvantage, because that means there's a lot of situations where luck points are completely worthless. because if the enemy already has disadvantage on the attack roll and they still hit you, you can't use luck to make them miss you. Whereas the current version, you can. And the same thing is true. If you roll with advantage and you miss, your luck points are completely worthless. There's nothing you can do because you can't get double advantage. So, it's okay. Moving on. The next feat is Magic Initiate. Magic Initiate is one of, or it used to be. I don't know if it's used that much anymore because, again, I'm out of the min-maxing game. I don't run for I don't run for random strangers at conventions anymore, so I don't get to see as many min-maxers. Magic Initiate used to be the min-maxers, one of the min-maxers' feats of choice, because there's just so many different ways. One of the most common ones to do is you'd be a rogue, and you would use the Magic Initiate feat to get one of the Bladesinger cantrips, because the way that they work is you make an attack roll as part of the spell, but you actually make an attack roll and you make a melee weapon attack. Well, sneak attack is triggered by a melee weapon attack. So, effectively what happened was tier 1, it didn't really make that much of a difference. But as soon as you got to tier 2, because cantrips level up as you go. By the way, another thing that started in 4th edition was cantrips getting more powerful as you level up. A lot of people don't realize that every at-will ability in D&D 4th edition got more powerful, and I think level 21, and it might have been level 11 as well. Basically, when you got to new tiers, your at-will abilities got more powerful. You can thank 4th edition for that. So, rogues would do that because basically what would happen is your main attack would now not only just do the damage you would normally do, but you would add on a D6 or a D8 of additional damage, and that would also combine with your sneak attack damage. And because rogues were not built to make multiple attacks, they only ever got one attack. The reason that cantrips level up is you don't get a multi-spell like you do with multi-attack. So rogues got a lot of benefit out of taking literally any one of the Bladesinger cantrips, either Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade. Booming Blade tended to be a little bit more popular because rogues could go in Booming Blade and then Cunning Action to disengage and run away, and then as soon as you move with Booming Blade, you take additional damage. And so that was the broken combo, and you would use Magic Initiate to do it, so you didn't have to waste a level taking Wizard or Sorcerer just to get the cantrip. You just use Magic Initiate, and you had a really, really already powerful rogue that could now do 48 damage plus sneak attack on their attack. So that was Magic Initiate, and the way that worked in 5th edition is choose a class: Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard. You learn 2 cantrips of your choice from the class's spell list, and you also learn a 1st level spell from the spell list, and your spellcasting ability is based on the class that you choose. So, the 5e version, or the 1 D&D version. Choose one spell list: Arcane, Divine, or Primal. Again, they've gotten rid of class spell lists for just 3 different versions of spell list. You have Arcane spells, Divine spells, Primal spells, which are nature spells. You gain the following benefits related to that choice: 2 cantrips. You learn 2 cantrips of your choice from the spell list. 1st level spell. Choose 1 1st level spell from the spell list. You always have that spell prepared. You can cast it once without a spell slot. You regain the ability to cast it in this way when you finish a long rest. You can also cast a spell using any spell slots you have. That is actually different from Magic Initiate. Magic Initiate, the spell that you learn from Magic Initiate, you cannot use spell slots to cast. And it apparently was specifically written that way. But later versions of similar spells, like Fey Touched, gives you the ability to cast a couple spells, made it so you could use spell slots to do that. Or there was, I think, Artificer Initiate, which actually gave you the ability, because Artificers are not on the Magic Initiate spell list, so you can't use the Artificer spell list. And it lets you cast them as spell slots. So that's the big difference. And And then Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma is your choice, is your spellcasting ability for these spells. Choose and you select this feat. So it's not limited to the spell list, which again, the original version of it, if you were picking a wizard cantrip, then wizards or intelligence casters, you had to use intelligence. This, you theoretically could choose a divine spell, which most divine spellcasters are wisdom based. And you could use charisma to cast it, or you could use intelligence to cast it, because it is in no way linked to the spell list you choose it to. So that does create some interesting things. And then whenever you gain a new level, you can replace one of the spells you chose with this feat with a different spell of the same level from the chosen spell list. So it also gives that other thing of maybe this was useful to me at level 1, or maybe I made the choice at level 1 and it was just the wrong choice. I thought that this is going to be a super useless spell, and it wasn't. So literally every time you level up, you can replace one of the spells, and that includes cantrips. So if you picked a cantrip and it's just you never use it, you can switch cantrips. So overall, I think this is just a better version of the Magic Initiate feat from 5th edition. And again, this is another feat that I have no problem implementing in my current 5th edition game. I don't think it's broken in any way, shape, or form. I think it fixes some issues. The only problem with it is there is no Arcane, Divine, or Primal spell list. In 5th edition, you would have to choose a spell list still. But the rest of it works fine. So, yeah. Moving on. The next feat is Musician, which doesn't exist in 5th edition at all. So this is a brand new feat. You get two things. You get instrument training. You gain tool proficiency with 3 musical instruments of your choice. And then as you finish a short rest or a long rest, you can play a song on a musical instrument with which you have tool proficiency and give inspiration to allies who hear the song. The number of allies you can affect this way equals your proficiency bonus. So effectively, Musician gives you proficiency in a bunch of musical instruments, and basically at the end of every short and long rest, you can give out inspiration. Now, with the new rules about how inspiration works, every time you roll a nat 20, you get inspiration. And that's it. So this is, effectively you get to start the day with inspiration with this. You don't have to wait for you to roll a nat 20. And because every time you roll a nat 20, you get inspiration, it does kind of encourage you, because you only ever have one inspiration at a time. Using this is basically just kind of encouraging people, giving significantly more ways for you to get inspiration. Just kind of encourages people to use it more often. Right now, again, people just don't use inspiration in 5th edition. I think that's one of the reasons why they made it every time you roll a nat 20, you get inspiration. Because it's an interesting thing, but it's just not used in... like DMs don't use it as a way to reward players in general. And I go out of my way to try and use it, and even I barely use it. So they're trying to give other ways for you to get inspiration than the DM having to remember, oh yeah, I can give out inspiration for things. And so this is one of the ways. Do I think this is useful as some of the other stuff? I would like something else other than, hey, you can give inspiration at the end of a short or long rest. To me, that seems like a bit of a cop-out, and it doesn't feel as good. I mean, yeah, it's nice, and one of the nice things about this is it does actually give classes that are not reliant on short rests an incentive to agree to a short rest. If like for I'm trying to think of classes that don't use short rests. Like druids generally don't, or rangers rarely use short rests. So if you've got most martial classes in general don't use a ton of short rests. Paladins do get their channel divinity back on a short rest, but a lot of them don't use their channel divinity that much. Yeah, it can be a way for you to kind of incentivize. Oh yeah, if we take a short rest, everyone gets inspiration. That's nice. Inspiration is a useful thing. Again, giving something advantage from a mechanical statistical standpoint, it's effectively giving them a plus 3.5 on their roll. So it's not a small number. As much as 3.5 doesn't sound very big, the highest you can roll is a 20. So 3.5 does actually weigh the scales pretty big. So it is useful. But it just, I don't know, for a musician feat, I would much rather see something. And this, again, I am a musician. I am a classically trained vocalist and a classically trained instrumentalist. I played saxophone for 20 years. I started, oh God, I guess it's been at least 15 years now since I did, it's been 20 years since I started getting voice lessons as well. Wow. So I guess it's been 25 years, I guess, since I started playing saxophone. Anyway, I took traditional lessons on saxophone and then eventually started learning clarinet. I play, technically I've played 3 different saxophones, though to be perfectly honest, you can, for the most part, you can play any saxophone. The fingerings are all the same. It's just learning the different armatures and things like that. But I actively played alto saxophone. I actively played tenor saxophone. And in college, I played bari sax for a semester, which is a fun instrument. And then again, as a vocalist, I took, 4 or 6 years of private voice lessons from brilliant, amazing voice teachers. My voice teachers consisted of an operatic soprano that actively working as a lead soprano at the Skylight Opera, an operatic bass, and then a doctor, a guy that had a doctorate in music and vocal performance. Like, the guy was a genius. I had brilliant teachers my entire life. I was very, very lucky that I got brilliant teachers and instructors. So as a musician, being able to inspire people with music is kind of how musicians are treated in RPGs in general, especially in fantasy RPGs, and that's not really accurate to being a musician. Fun fact about musicians, specifically instrumentalists, but it has a very tiny correlation with vocalists as well, but it's significantly heavier correlation with instrumentalists. Instrumentalists are better students, and it is proven fact. They've done studies on it. The study I'm most familiar with, they studied people who started playing an instrument, I believe, in 6th grade. If you started an instrument in 6th grade and you stopped playing your freshman year of high school, your grades in general, I think, were something like 8% higher than the rest of your peers. If you stayed all the way through senior year, your grades were about, it was either 12 or 20%. I can't remember the exact number. But you actually had higher grades than the rest of the school, and it was directly tied to not only whether or not you played an instrument, but how long you played an instrument for. So musicians in general tend to be really great learners, and they also tend to be remarkably good at math. They're also very, very good at analyzing situations and things like that, and they tend to be relatively intuitive. All of those things work really, really well in testing in general. If you're highly intuitive and you're good at math, you will score better on standardized test, which is what they use to measure that in, than anyone else. Because intuition plays really, really well in standardized testing, because most standardized testing uses some form of multiple choice. And intuition can help you figure out not so much the right answer, but you can figure out the wrong answers. It's unbelievably simple to get rid of at least 2 on any 4 multiple choice question on any standardized test ever. It is unbelievably simple to get rid of 2 of the choices instantly, and know exactly which ones you have to choose from, because there's a formula to writing them. And once you learn the formula, it's super, super easy. Basically, they will always have one that is massively wrong. They will have one that's kind of weird, and then they will have 2 that are really, really close. but change a word or here too. If you're ever on a test and you find a question where two of the answers are really, really close, but they just change a word or two, it's one of those two answers 9 times out of 10. Now, test writers have realized that people figured out that, and sometimes they'll do that as a red herring, but it is an accepted testing practice if you test a lot. So intuition can be very, very useful. And just numbers in general tend to be, if you are good with numbers, you tend to be good with testing environments just in general. And all of that correlates very highly to people that are musically gifted. Specifically with this, musician is specifically referring to instrumentalists, because they specifically talk about instruments. You don't get to train your voice as one of your instruments, despite the fact that being a vocalist is a very specific type of a musician who requires a very specific type of training to do. A lot of people undervalue the ability to sing when you compare it to multi-instrumentalists or things like that, where they play a bunch of different instruments. Oh my God, you play a saxophone? All I can do is sing. No, singing is very difficult. So anyway, the musician feats and abilities for musician in RPGs is always, well, you can inspire someone or you can control their mind. I would love to see a musician feat that gives you a bonus to insight, or allows you to use your insight ability to do something that you normally can't. Because that is, I grew up around music people. Everyone in my family played an instrument. I was a band geek in high school. I spent 90% of my day in the band hallway. I started every day in the band hallway. I spent most of my day in the band hallway, and I ended every day in the band hallway. I was surrounded by musicians all of the time. In college, I majored in theater and I minored in music, and my dorm was across the street from the music auditorium where all the music classes were held. I spent almost all of my time between the music building and the theater building, which was right next to it. I was all my friends were music majors and theater majors. I was surrounded by musicians. Musicians are incredibly smart. They tend to be very analytical, and they tend to be very good with intuition and insight. So can we get a feat that treats musicians as something other than the Pied Piper, please? There are so many other aspects of being a musician that are never talked about here. So yeah, this one I think is, I get it. They want to give more reasons to give inspiration, but do something other than, I can play my song, and now I can make you feel special. It's not what being a musician is. Apparently, everyone that designs D&D thinks the only musicians that exist are the douchebag that brings the guitar to the party and always wears like a button-up shirt open with a bare chest, and he just sits in the corner and is like, I wrote this song while I was looking at a bug. That bug was just living his life, and I thought maybe that's the way that we should. They apparently think all musicians are just douches. And it's not true. Again, I grew up from 6th grade on. Most of my time was spent around music geeks and musicians in general. And there's more to us than, so this is my song about a little bit of gas I had about 5 minutes ago. And I love that me playing the guitar is doing nothing with my left hand and then just randomly finger picking the wrong way. So anyway, yeah, musician feat, kind of dumb, but whatever. Moving on. The next feat, Savage Attacker. This is another one that I think, yeah, it does exist. Nobody ever takes it. Mostly because great weapon fighting is really the only people that would use a feat like this, and they already have a fighting style that does effectively the same thing. Savage Attacker in D&D, again, it's in the player's handbook. Once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee weapon attack, you can re-roll the weapon's damage dice and use either total. It's really not that useful. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use a Savage Attacker To be perfectly honest, this should be what I call a half feat, which is effectively you get an ability score improvement plus an ability, and Savage Attacker isn't. So the one D&D version, when you take the attack action and hit a target with a weapon as part of that action, you can roll the weapon's damage dice twice and use either roll against the target. You can use this benefit only once per turn. So again, this one is as limited as Savage, like it's almost a carbon copy. This one puts a few more limitations where it has to be part of the attack action. So if you had Savage Attacker and you cast Green Flame Blade, in the 5th edition version, you could re-roll the weapon damage die because it just says whenever you roll damage for a melee weapon attack. This one, it has to be when you take the attack action and hit a target with a weapon as part of that action. So it really, really limits it to you have to use weapons, has to be a part of the attack action. You can only do that once per turn. The big difference is you can roll the weapon's damage dice twice. So in this one, you technically, you re-roll. So you see the die and then you choose to re-roll it. This one, you can choose to roll the damage dice twice. So technically this Savage Attacker, I could see it being interpreted as you have to choose to use it before you roll the dice because it says that you can roll the damage dice twice. Whereas the other one is really kind of built around the idea of you don't use it until after you've seen the dice. Like I said, I can see this one being interpreted the exact same way. I just, because of how they worded it, I could also see DMs sitting down and saying, no, you have to choose before you make the roll. And until they make a ruling on it, that's going to be a source of contention. Either way, they're not useful. I would say, again, compared to like a feat in 5th edition, and again, first level feats, you might argue that, well, these are first level feats, so they're not supposed to be as useful. I still don't see this being that useful. And again, as you get to higher levels, it becomes less and less useful, especially since it has to be the attack action. So this Savage Attacker can't even be used on opportunity attacks, which the 5th edition version can be. So Savage Attacker, because you have to take the attack action, which you can only take on your turn, this is an extremely limited version of a feat that nobody used before because it was already too limited. So I would say get rid of the once per turn. Like, if you want to turn this into a feat that people actually want to take, let them just roll all your weapon damage dice twice. If you have someone that's going to be using this feat, they're just going to know that every time they make their longsword attack, they roll 2d8 instead of 1 and choose between them. They're just going to roll them at the same time. So it's not like it's going to bog down combat or anything like that. It's statistical manipulation, which is a viable thing to do in RPGs in general. Anything that has chance involved in it, learning how to manipulate these statistical probabilities is useful. I think that would be a lot better, and get rid of the attack action. Make it effectively the same Savage Attacker from 5th edition, just turn it into and just let them always do it. I don't understand why they decided to make a feat that people already don't use because it's too limited and limit it more. That seems like a really weird decision. It's possible that the reason they did this is there are other things that are changing with the classes that we don't know about yet that this is going to conflict with. And that might be something, and that's another thing we have to understand is I'm basing this off of how 5th edition works. 1 D&D may not work the same way. The classes may not work the same way. The rules changes that they've already talked about are already changing how the things work. So it's possible that this will interact in a certain way that we can't predict right now. But as far as everything that's in this playtest packet, this is a worthless feat. So, yeah. Moving on. It definitely doesn't feel good to take Savage Attacker at all. It feels really, really watered down. The next one is Skilled. Skilled is another one that exists currently. And it's literally, you gain proficiency in any combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice. That's the 5th edition version. The 1D&D, choose 3 skills in which you lack proficiency. You gain proficiency in those skills. Again, it's something that's not... It's almost never used in 5th edition D&D, because instead of getting 3 skills, you can get like skill expert is something that was introduced in Tasha's, and this is a half feat where effectively you increase ability score of your choice by 1, you gain proficiency in a skill, and you get expertise in something. Skill expert is really, really useful. Skilled just isn't. And the same thing is true here. Just getting 3 additional skills is not that useful. You already get a remarkable number of skills from your class and then from your background. You're generally going to have anywhere between 4 and 6 skills that you're proficient in. And D&D in general has never benefited. It's never been a good idea to make jack of all trade classes. When the bard was just a jack of all trade class, it was a really underutilized class because D&D has always rewarded specialization. Because you're a part of a team, everybody should have their own little specialization. And Skilled is a feat that's designed to make you a much broader character. As opposed to being specialized in only a few things, you're relatively good at a lot of different things. And so it kind of goes against how D&D is designed and how it's played. So this is another one that I understand why. The human race, you actually can get skilled as part of being a human. In this one, you get a free feat. And getting additional proficiency. It's nice. Again, you can go from especially if you choose a class that only gets 2 proficiencies and a background that gets 2 proficiencies, you only have 4 proficiencies. This turns it to 7. You have almost doubled the number of skills you're proficient in. But again, D&D favors specialization, not broad generalization. So yeah, not a huge fan of Skilled either. Moving on. The next feat, my personal favorite, Tavern Brawler. Tavern Brawler is a feat in 5th edition, and nobody uses it because it's kind of a dumb feat. In 5th edition, it's a half feat, so increase strength or con by 1 to a maximum of 20. Plus, you're proficient with improvised weapons. Your unarmed strike uses a d4 for damage, and when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or an improvised weapon on your turn, you can use a bonus action to attempt to grapple the target. The grappling rules in 5th edition are not good. Nobody likes them. Nobody uses them. We talked last time about the fact that they changed how grappling works in 1D&D and that it's actually useful. So that on its own makes the 5th edition version of Tavern Brawler actually kind of useful. But it gets even cooler. So, Tavern Brawler... you gain the following benefits. Enhanced unarmed strike. When you hit with your unarmed strike and deal damage, again, they have to put that in there because they've already mentioned that hitting with an unarmed strike, you can grapple or you can shove or trip. In 5th edition, those are all contested strength athletics checks. In this, you make an attack roll, and as long as you beat their AC, you can grapple, shove, or trip instead of doing damage. So they specifically state when you hit with your unarmed strike and deal damage, you can deal bludgeoning damage equal to a d4 plus your strength mod instead of the normal damage of an unarmed strike, which is 1 plus your strength mod. So it does effectively the same thing. Your unarmed strikes use a d4 for damage. Same basic thing. But there's more. Whenever you roll a damage die for your unarmed strike, you can re-roll the die if it rolls a 1. You must use the new roll. So that helps with enhanced unarmed strikes. But anyone that has the ability to use unarmed strikes in general, like monks. Damage rerolls is going to be useful for them, whereas Tavern Brawler for a monk is completely wasted. They don't use strength scores at all. And Constitution scores are kind of nice, but not that great for a monk. They generally want to focus on Dex and Wisdom. Improvised weapons doesn't really do anything. They can punch shit. A D4 for unarmed strikes, their unarmed strikes are already better than that. And bonus action to grapple, they have so many other better uses for their bonus action. So a monk would never take the 5th edition version of Tavern Brawler. 1D&D, though, just the damage rerolls itself could be useful. And then there's more. Next, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away. You can use this benefit only one per turn. So now, when you hit with an unarmed strike, you can also knock them back 5 feet for free. Now, you can only do it once per turn, but that adds control into the Tavern Brawler. Again, that actually becomes useful for like a monk or anyone. Like they have a brawling fighting style that actually gives you a D6 for your unarmed strikes in 5th edition. Again, taking the fighting style brawling, you would never take the Tavern Brawler thing because it's just not worth it. But Tavern Brawler in 1D&D, now you get even more things. And that's not the end of it. There's one more thing. The final thing. Furniture as weapons. You can wield furniture as a weapon. Using the rules of the Great Club for small or medium furniture and the rules for club for tiny furniture. So, Tavern Brawler, instead of you're proficient with improvised weapon, basically says small or medium furniture, you can use it as a great club, and tiny furniture you can use as a club. I love this. You can pick up a chair and beat people with it. I hit you with my +1 chair of smiting. Whack! Oh, well, then I hit you with my +2 table of shut the fuck up. Bam! I love it. I think it's cool. And again, everything else in here is cool. The only thing with furniture as weapon, both the damage rerolls and the shove are literally everything else in Tavern Brawler is useless with furniture as weapon. I would kind of like to see at least either damage rerolls or shove also have the ability, if you're using furniture as weapon, to be able to use those as well. Because the whole thing is pretty useful. And the furniture as weapon, I think is hilarious. It's not the key focus of Tavern Brawler. The key focus is basically giving you better unarmed strikes and giving you more things you can do with unarmed strikes. But the furniture as weapon is a nice little bonus that I think is cool. So overall, I love Tavern Brawler here. This is another one that I would be perfectly fine using it in D&D 5th edition right now, because I don't really see a problem with anything in it. Other than the shove ability kind of takes away some of the specialness of the open hand monk. Because the open hand monk, one of the things they can do is when they flurry of blows, they can push people or knock them down and things like that, which is nice. But it also involves a save, so Tavern Brawler is just a better version of that. The nice thing about that is the open hand monk, their thing only works on bonus actions effectively because it requires your flurry of blows, and this only works on your action, so technically they work together. But overall, yeah, I like Tavern Brawler. I think it's cool. Finally, the final feat is Tough. Tough exists already. And it's the exact same thing. You get +2 hit points per character level. That's what it is. They have specific words. I'm not going to read all the words because there's lots of them, but it's basically 2 hit points per level, and it's retroactive. So if you take it at level 6, you instantly get 12 hit points. And then every level after that, you get an additional 2 hit points on top of the hit points you already gain. It is a boring feat, and it is an incredibly useful boring feat. There's nothing like, wow, I can do this amazing thing with a tough. No, it's just extra hit points, and it's massively useful. There's no way to undervalue the tough feat. Literally every class can use the tough feat. I've got one player in one of my campaigns that he lowballed Constitution, and just keeps getting taken out. And he was asking me for some. I was like, well, how do I stop this? Because I really hate the fact that every combat I'm unconscious. And we talked about some of the ways he's playing the character and better ways he could play it so he wouldn't always end up dead. Because a lot of the reason he was ending up dead was he was just playing the character poorly. But I also meant get the tough feat. If your constitution sucks and you don't want to piecemeal it up, but by using your ability score improvements to just improve your constitution, take the tough feat. It is an instant boost to your hit points, and every class can use it. And he's a full caster. I'm just tough feat. Tough feat is good. Use the tough feat. It's good. So I really don't have any problems with the tough feat. It's just a good feat. There's no. It is the most boring, useful feat ever, because there's nothing interesting about it. It's just me give bigger number to hit point, and it's just useful. There's no two ways about it. It's useful. Anyway, so those are the feats. Final thoughts. Overall, I like a lot of the new feats. Specifically, the alert feat is really, really great. I think it's amazing. The healer feat, I think, makes some changes that are interesting. And Tavern Brawler is amazing. The rest of them need some work. It's not that they're bad, but depending on how the system is different, these are going to have... Like, the Lucky feat is a worse version of Lucky, and it's that way on purpose. There's a lot of DMs that don't like the Lucky feat. I know some specifically that forbid the Lucky feat in the game. And I think that's really dumb, because it's not nearly as powerful as people make it out to be. They just get mad when they think they've outsmarted the players and the players use it. But everything else in here, they're okay. Again, the big issue, like the Crafter feat is probably the best example of it. The big issue with these feats is we have no idea what they're interacting with. We don't know what any of the classes do right now. And so we don't know if maybe the Artificer in D&D actually has crafting rules built into it. And so the Crafter feat is massively useful for the Artificer. Or maybe just crafting in D&D is significantly more useful. Because in 5th edition right now, crafting is almost useless. Because the few things that you can craft, you can buy, and you generally don't save that much money crafting them yourself. It's mostly just, and I helped. And that's really the only benefit you get from crafting in 5th edition right now. And any additional benefit is something that you homebrew in. There are no real good benefits that are built into 5th edition right now. So I like the idea of the Crafter feat, but it feels a little bit underpowered, and if we're comparing it to how the crafting works in 5th edition, it's a completely pointless feat. But depending on the changes that they make in D&D, it might become something that's really, really interesting, and you might be able to create a character that is built around the idea that you build things for your party. That was a character that you could have in 3rd edition that really didn't exist in 4th edition because things didn't work the same way. And it was a cool position to be in, to be the one that made things. Like, that was fun. Percy in the first Critical Role campaign kind of fit that position, being the gunslinger, where he was constantly making stuff. Like, he made a saddle for Vex's broom. And he was constantly making tools and little gizmos and gadgets and things like that. So a character like that would benefit a lot from a Crafter feat. But again, all of that stuff was homebrewed by Matt. None of it exists in 5th edition D&D. And so with the tiny, tiny bit of D&D that we've seen in this playtest, The crafter feat has no use whatsoever. But I hope that it means, since they're making it a first level feat, that they're going to be making crafting a bigger part of the game. Because it is a really cool thing in an RPG to be the one that can build stuff and can make stuff. Like, you feel really, really special if your allies are running into combat with the weapons that you made them. Like, that just feels really special, and you can't really do that in 5th edition right now. So, anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notification on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, of the feats we talked about, what is your favorite of these new 1 D&D feats? Or how would you change one of the ones that isn't as useful? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. I'll see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.